All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, you had some complaints about football, and I've got thoughts as well. Uh, then you also sent me a very cynical something about Vivek, but you weren't very
Yes.
specific. So I don't know if I'm defending him or not.
Well,
But
no, there's no way you can defend the stupid Hindu jerks. Vivek is officially off my list because karma is a jerk and I hate it.
well, I don't know what this is about, but I have
Well,
nothing against
it's about
Hindu
my
people.
foot that I don't
It's
think is broken, but it sure hurts like it is.
well, because you were making fun of my broken foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
my dog, who's less than half the size of your dogs who try and kill me, he just nudged me and my while I was walking, and my foot goes flying into a corner, and I kicked it really hard. And so now I've been hobbling around the last couple of days, and it's really annoying.
Oh, and sneaky statistics. That's what
Sneaky
we were talking about the
statistics.
other day. No, I did text that to you because I was studying for a test and it was pissing me off. Yeah. Which I did
Okay.
very well on, by the way. So apparently I can be sneaky with my statistics as well, like a slithery snake.
Well, speaking of sneaky statistics, um,
So while you start the ranting process, I'm going to find that slide.
well, that was just my rant about my stupid foot, and that's over now.
Well, but well, do you want to start with a slide or do you want to start with
Well,
football?
this ties into my football rant, I think, because part of the reason that football sucks is because um, people have a tendency to look at data to convince themselves of a thing, not to look at data to understand what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's an example. And I went looking for some numbers, and I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for, but um, McDonald's. So I found a an article on Fortune about how McDonald's sales were in decline, and it's the worst decline since uh, the late aughts, so 2005 to 2010. They had a pretty serious decline. What was happening in that time frame? McDonald's was being attacked for being junk food. Well, duh. Yes, we have always known that McDonald's is junk food. And so they started to pander to people who didn't even go to McDonald's and started offering crappy salads and grilled chicken and other things that were that they took losses on, that people were not buying, but it was still taking up cost, it was still taking up inventory space, menu space, and they saw a decline in sales. And rather quietly, about a decade later, they kind of got rid of all that and they just went back to their standards, the junk food that people go to because they like the salt and the fat. Well, the NFL started doing the same thing, is pandering to people who not only didn't watch the NFL but didn't like pro football because it was too masculine.
Not everybody knows it was junk food.
Okay. Well,
Advertising does matter. This was a real ad at a certain time.
yes.
So
Um I still say you would be hard pressed to that's a derailment. The point being, football has been doing this by attempting to cater to a more feminine audience. And this is one of so the late great Rush Limbaugh was accused of making everything political when he was just reacting to things that he saw before other people did, like the pink nonsense. Oh, so you must be pro cancer. No, I just think this is dumb and annoying, and it's pandering. They're not doing this because that many people care that deeply about breast cancer. They're doing it because they're trying to appeal to a female audience because the NFL skews more so, 10, 15, 20 years ago, skewed heavily male. Women didn't watch football hardly at all. So they started, pushing the softer side of football. They started pushing the service stuff. They started pushing fantasy because that's a way to get non-fans interested in the game, is the game within the game, which is fantasy, which is
Well,
now
not
gambling.
only that, I'll say from experience, I love watching football, but I watch more games when I'm playing fantasy football because I have interest in other games. Whereas, like this last Sunday, where my team laid an egg against the worst team in the league, which we can't call them the worst team in the league if they beat you, right? Uh, they laid an egg in that game. Normally, I would have shut it off and found something else to do. But I had a lot of players left to play, and I watched all the way through Monday night, which my Monday night player laid an egg, all of one catch, and didn't get me the half of his projected points I needed to win. But I'm not bitter at all. But no, it fantasy did do a good job of that. Now here's gonna be my counter argument. I'm gonna steel man the people behind this, and I'm going to say there is a right and wrong way to do it. And I'm going to give as the first example of the wrong way what we've talked about before, the whole Dylan Mulvaney scandal with Bud Light. They did the we're pro trans, we got Dylan Mulvaney, we're putting her on a can and she's going to advertise for us. It wasn't just that they did that. That's the problem. Yeah, she targets children in her TikToks and all of these. Those were all a problem. But the main problem was the statements by the person who did it. Our target audience, our target group, our target customer are these stupid frat boys, and we want to change that mentality. That's where they went wrong. It wasn't trying to get a new audience that was the problem. It was the rejection of the primary customer.
Well,
Whereas
there no.
adding the pink doesn't reject the we're for breast cancer or we're for the service or all of these things. That didn't reject the normal audience. Now maybe they probably overdid it, but it didn't reject the normal audience. Now where the NFL went wrong with the kneeling and the Black Lives Matter was it did reject the standard audience, which was your normal red-blooded American that sat and watched football and didn't want to think about politics for 3 hours.
Which they had been pandering to since Desert Storm, when they started making the national anthem and the flyovers a bigger and bigger deal, as they purposely started pandering to patriotism and trying to equate liking football, watching football, as being, a red-blooded patriotic American. And something that got lost in all that I just randomly remembered the other day is, remember there was something of a minor scandal. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was around the kneeling time, I think, that this came out, where the numbers of of how much was being paid by the military to advertise with the NFL. And it was revealed that, oh, you're not having these military groups and military members, carry the flag and be part of your national anthem opening ceremony because you're patriotic red blood Americans. They're paying you to do that. The military was paying as advertising cost. They were paying the NFL to participate in that. And that was completely forgotten. It was completely steamrolled by other news that was going on. And that should have been a big red flag to go, oh, wait a minute. You're not who you say you are. But I will. So that's the best steel man that I think you can do, but it's still insufficient. And Gad Sad made this point after the Bud Light kerfuffle, is because that's his wheelhouse, was uh, uh, evolutionary psychology in marketing, how to use that in marketing specifically. And he made the point of, but why? Because you're targeting a very tiny slice of the population who aren't inclined to like your product in the first place. But even if you do get some significant portion of that demographic, the demographic is so small that that's not going to move the needle. So why are you doing it? And this is where the idea of virtue signaling comes in, because it's
Well,
not actually about what it's actually about.
that well, that's also where cost benefit analysis comes in because if I can get even a tiny portion of a tiny portion without losing any of my base, then it's a good move.
Well,
It's a no risk situation, right? But if I do something that possibly will lose me some of, like, if I lose 1% of my base, but I get 1% of a smaller base, that's a loss, right?
mhm.
And that's where it comes in. So I don't mind a company reaching out. We talked about this with the Miller Lite commercial. It would have been fine if they reached out to women, that is, they didn't add the fuck you to men on the end of
Yeah.
it, right? That's fine. I mean, 50% of the country is women. Go ahead and try to get some women to buy your product. Have a commercial. Michelob Ultra does this well, which is Anheuser-Busch, but the Michelob Ultra commercials do this well, is they have their normal guys hanging out commercials, but then they also have two girls running and they go meet for a beer after commercial. You're going after two target audiences and nobody gets pissed off. You just have two separate commercials to get
I
two
I will
audiences.
say there is a problem though, is where I would put the problem is the why are you doing it? It's you're not doing it because, hey, we have this untapped demographic that could add to our bottom line. You're doing it because a very vocal and virulent minority of voices are saying you're a bad person if you don't. If you don't pander to this group, if you don't affirm this or that group, you're a bad person. You're a problematic company where, you will end up in our crosshairs for cancellation. So to me, that there is a problem because of the incentive structure that has been created through cancel culture, through outrage culture.
Well, I think this is where human nature collides with rationality, because I don't even mind if you virtue signal a little bit to keep people off your back as a big company. Just don't do it at the expense of your base. If they were to do a movement that, hey, we're going to go ahead and, be the sole provider of drag queen shows, only adults, right? They did something like that. Okay.
Yeah,
They're going after a new audience. They're specifying their position on it, and everybody's happy. And I wouldn't even mind that. And I was like, oh, you know what? You might be wasting money because it's a small profit margin, but at the same time, you didn't do anything to alienate the people in your base, right? Except for maybe the ultra Christian conservatives that would say no to, or I say religious conservatives, fundamentalist conservatives, because that could be Islam or Christian or anything, that would say drag is bad, period, even if it's all adults. You might alienate that group, but that's also a small percentage.
well, I disagree on that because of what it's become. See, and this is where the uh
Well,
uh
this is where I would be pissed if I was trans or if I was a regular dude that liked drag, because you made me the enemy by your movement.
yes, it's, and I can't remember who I first heard talking, and I've heard more and more people bring this up recently, is that how and why did transvestite and transgender get merged? They've been completely blurred. It used to be that a drag show was shtick, okay? It was Klinger in MASH. It was
Mhm.
the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was something like that. Now it is something that has become inherently political, and you're going to tick off more than just your, straw religious people that you're throwing out there. You're going to tick more people off because more people are. This goes back to our trigonometry kissing on with Williamson, and their discussion is it's not just the it's not just the thing anymore. It's not just the specific example. Everything has been bundled into this, you know, this Marxist woke worldview that if you are not with us, you are against us. And this is a major component of it, at least now, at least within the last couple of years, is the trans drag issue. So it's going to be nigh impossible to reach out to that demographic because of how it has been co-opted by a movement of radicals. You could not engage. Another example of even back when it first started with Ferguson, which was what, almost 10 years ago now, or if not more, where the roots of the BLM movement came from.
Was that 2014?
It was something like that. It
It
was
was
like
after
right,
Trayvon Martin, and Trayvon Martin was 2013.
yeah. So all of this started to accelerate right at the beginning of Obama's second term. And wonder of
Right at the
wonders,
time that the
uh-huh.
media could start propagandizing for the government.
And you have brought up the graphs of the key words and phrases
Mhm.
to show how this was happening, to show this objectively with numbers. But
Well, and I'm going to say I'm going to jump in because of you were talking about the movement and you were semi-establishing blame there. And this is something that the radicals on the left are to blame for, but also they're being very much assisted by the people on the right that wanted to hate those things to begin with. They're getting
well, no,
exactly they're
that's
Saul
a
Alinsky was
distortion.
right.
No,
Saul Alinsky was right.
no,
No,
you're
no, it's the inability. No, I'm specifically talking about the inability to separate two things. And if the rational response of, well, what you're displaying isn't the thing you're saying I'm against, so all you have to do is say, well, no, that's different. And what you're doing is wrong, but the thing you're saying I'm against is different. And we're not getting that from the other side. We're getting, oh my God, take everything down. Look how horrible they are.
well, because they are horrible. Because the people who are doing this are
No, I'm
horrible
saying
and they are
they
pushing
are
awful things.
look how horrible they are is reflected on everybody who's of the alternative lifestyle. This is where bias comes in because there
Okay, but
is
no, I'm so slow down because I've got to go back to where you started because that you're right. There's your bias of when you said that
I
they
said both
made it
sides are wrong. Where's my bias?
because of your phrasing and the way you framed the issue of that the right is helping the radical left because how what was it you said that it was people they wanted to hate anyway. No, that is a gross slant of of the right in general. That's the
Ha-
wanting to hate part.
have you
That's the
heard Matt
dozen
Walsh
people.
talk?
Yeah,
He explicitly says all trans people are bad.
I don't know that I've heard him say are bad, but are wrong.
No,
Yeah, are
he wants to ban all trans surgeries, even adults. And I think it's
okay.
actually Jordan Peterson who was interviewing him, but don't quote me on that. But it's one of those big interviews.
Okay, I'll have to go list, but from what I have listened to him, I know what his argument probably is, which is the same argument that Peterson was making with regards to Ellen/Elliot Page, which is there's no justifiable medical or psychological reason to do this. So yeah, it should be banned. In the
No,
same way
Peterson's
that
position on Page is I'm just going to not use a first name so I don't have to worry about anything. It still goes by Page. The uh the position is the influence,
no, I'm talking about when
celebration of the thing.
I remember what got him in
If
big trouble was when he went after the doctors who performed the surgeries. That
but
because
he did it in a context of the influence it has on minors.
okay.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with things being taken down is you don't get to hear the whole thing all the time. And so he really did do it in the context of celebrating it and the influence it has on other people. If this had been some rando with no influence doing it in their own life, he's explicitly said he has no problem with it. But Matt Walsh, on the other hand,
Okay.
does have a problem with it.
I what I had heard the context of it that I remembered was and I think this came up in a relatively recent podcast fizz I was listening to while I was driving, and I don't remember who the interviewee was.
Now
That
he may have changed his tune since he made his little spiel about it, but
because I know when he's talked about Leah Thomas or Thompson, whatever, the swimmer, this has come up, and it may be the woman whose name I always forget, who has written on money and the origins
Oh yeah.
of gender ideology and its in influence in the medical community that he has talked about that
I'm gonna
he
have to look it
doesn't
up.
see, you know, you know, uh, angry woke leftists have gone after him and his licenses, and they've gone after Malone and McCullough coming under the cross. McCullough, especially because he's still a practicing doctor, he still sees patients. That he and others have had their license attacked because they won't toe the party line for whatever it is, whatever the woke ideology of the day is. And he's making the point that how do you justify people who perform these gender affirming cares? There is absolutely no data, no science, no anything to support doing this, is his contention. So how do they still
Well,
have a
but again, you
license?
got to context is key because there's a difference between. Oh, here we go. Here, let's find her name. No, I don't want to watch the video. Give me her name.
But the
Miriam
point,
Grossman. Miriam
yes,
Grossman. Okay. No, but this is again where two things are being pushed together. There is no data to suggest that any of this helps your psychological state as a minor, but your decisions as an adult are irrespective of your psychological state. Your decisions as an adult are, I want this, I have the money to do it. And that is a different infringement on rights than talking about minors and trying to fix people. Those are two completely different arguments there. So if a dude that's 30 years old that says, I want boobs, goes in and gets boobs, well, now you got a dude with boobs. Hope you're happy, dude. Cha-ching. I just made a lot of money. Whereas a minor or someone that's trying to justify this on the sense that I'm going, I'm more suicidal if I do that. Yeah, then you'd be completely correct. There is no evidence to suggest that that's going to help. In fact, there's evidence to the contrary. And so we shouldn't be making medical decisions based on no evidence, and we should definitely not be making medical decisions based on really shitty evidence. So those are two completely separate discussions. And the inability to separate those two things is part of the problem. And
no,
yes,
they're not necessarily,
the activists are very responsible
except
for
they're
the
not
fact that they've
necessarily
clouded
separate.
the argument.
They aren't necessarily separate conversations because
If you're crazy and you spend money on something that only hurts you, that's within your rights.
no, 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 because where it becomes a muddy issue, and I think Walsh and I think Peterson is in at least partially in this camp, is except it's not just going out and buying something stupid. You are uh incorporating someone else's activity as well. Someone has to perform the surgery. It's not just buying a thing.
Yeah,
Somebody
but
has to
if I
perform
want
the
to
surgery.
if I want to supply something that's bad for you and you're a perfectly normal, you're perfectly within your right as an adult to buy it from me. I mean, we should close all liquor stores per your
No,
argument.
okay, I saw where you were going, and I was already ready to cut you off because we don't. But what we do is, if you are a bartender, you are obligated to cut someone off. Okay, no, you've had enough, buddy. You know,
Well, but that there's a public part of that.
yeah.
A bartender and liquor store are separate, right? You can't. If I go to a liquor store and buy 3 handles and go home and
Mhm.
drink myself to death, that is not on the liquor store.
No, because
But
the liquor store.
the bartender's responsibility to cut me off has nothing to do with my health. The bartender's responsibility to cut me off has to do with the fact that I'm in a social
But
environment
it no,
and I
but
could
it's not
drive home
just
and hurt
that.
somebody.
It's the liquor store passively contributed to what you did. You still ultimately took that action. The bartender is proactively, affirmatively participating in your self-destructive action. So it's an analogy would be why the movie industry lost its case when it tried to sue to keep VCRs off the market. Is yes, some people may and will perform illegal activities with these devices to illegally, copy things they're not supposed to or record things they're not supposed to. But that is not the sole purpose of this device. That is not the only purpose of this device. And there are innumerable perfectly legal uses for this device that people can and will and are making use of. So there's a difference there in, oh, the only use for this device is to do something illegal. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. My head still really hurts.
No, I think you're missing the spirit of the bartending law. It is for the protection of everybody else that the bartender is supposed to do that. A liquor store that sees the same person walk in every day and buy bottles would have the same right if it was about the person's health. Because then at some point, everything's active and passive at some point. I mean, the bartender giving you the drink has nothing to do with you drinking the drink.
Okay, no, that's how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
Well,
Nonsense.
you're making that argument.
No,
I'm the
I
one
am
saying
not.
I'm the one
There
saying
is a
an adult
huge
harming
difference
themselves is
in
different
me
than
mixing you a drink and handing it to you versus you walking into a store full of stuff on the shelf and you just grab the stuff off the shelf, you check out and you go, and then you do with that on your own time personally. How did we even get here?
because how did we even get here? I know how we got here in the last couple comments, but I don't know how we got here from the main point. What
It
was
was
the
your
main point?
phraseology of the right wanting to hate people, which is
No,
a
there is a
leftist
there's
slur.
okay, so maybe wanting isn't the right word, but inability to separate what is actually the problem from what is people.
Well, and my point that okay, so starting there, that's a good point, but my point is that what is actually the problem is a bigger problem. And that's why I brought up Kissen and Williamson is as Kissen said, the attack wasn't on Sam Harris per se, it was that Sam Harris was an avatar for all of these other things, all of these other people, this bigger picture. Same thing with Bud Light and, the Dylan Mulvaney. It's not just that it's Bud Light hired this person that a lot of people find reprehensible. It's Bud Light is a huge company and it is just another in a long laundry list of companies doing woke nonsense. And to your point, part of that woke nonsense is taking a dump all over their customer base.
We talked about this in one of my sessions today because I was talking about everything being oversimplified. And this might seem like a tangent for a second, but it is on this point. Because it's the difference, it's the dichotomies that are forming. It's the you're evil, you're good because you're right or you're left or whatever. And just a little side note, I do blame Sam Harris because I've read all his books. And my problem with him and his statements isn't the left is doing this. My problem is he contradicted everything he's written. That's my problem with him. But that's separate. And unless you've had that intimate relationship of reading all of his stuff and actually admiring it for a long time, then you didn't have that same hit. But what I talked about, I brought up you might, anybody who's listened to these things, you might recognize some of these names. Michael Boyle. Michael Boyle's a strength coach, a very famous strength coach, and in a lot of ways, very, very good. And one of the compliments he gets from other people in the industry is he is not afraid to say I was wrong. That sounds great. It's a very big humble brag is what it is. He's not afraid to admit when he's wrong. The problem is there is another end to that is you have to be wrong a lot to get that compliment. and you have to be wrong a lot, obviously, that it's enough that you can see it clear as day on another instance. One the reason this came up in the session was there's Stuart McGill is probably one of the best back experts in the world. I've got 3 of his books back there, and we've mentioned him before for back health. and he's got they call it the McGill crunch, a certain way of doing a crunch.
Hmm.
Uh, and I had heard Michael Boyle on Brute Force podcast. Cashew is the guy out of Austin. He was a CrossFit champion, and he has his own podcast. And this is Michael Boyle was on there, and what he said was, well, they were talking about having sources and not making everything up on your own. And he said, well, yeah, you can't have mental capacity to make everything up from scratch. And so you have to have trusted sources. And one of the ones he brought up was Stuart McGill. And he said, well, Stuart McGill, well, if he says don't do crunches, well, I'm going to say don't do crunches because he's the best back guy in the world. I heard the interview that he was talking with Stuart McGill on his own podcast. Stuart McGill never said don't do crunches. Stuart McGill said people are probably doing too many crunches. And he had a sentence in there that said, I'm not saying don't ever do crunches. I'm just saying that there are certain things in your back that could be negatively impacted by doing too many or doing them incorrectly. And after that, Boyle is saying don't do crunches because McGill says don't do crunches. This is the same mentality as what we're talking about. This is bad because this thing that is semi-connected to everything else that's involved with it. And I think this is a version of the right looking at the left and saying don't do crunches based on these bad examples. Now we got on this, but from pandering is what we got on this from companies. That's where we started, but
We did, and we didn't even get to the crux of my rant, which
well,
was
we'll get right back to it. It just ticks me off when I see things like that because it is very much the word is overused. It's a straw man, and Stuart McGill never said don't do crunches. He even has a crunch named after him. But this perfectly normal, successful person took it that way from one conversation and completely took it the wrong way. And he demonized crunches. And I hate that we're seeing a demonization of something based on the actual legitimately bad versions of it that are coming out. And if I was someone in that community, and there are some voices, Blair White, Buck Angel, that are speaking out. If I was something in that community, that's the voice that needs to be heard because they're the ones that should be really pissed off. But on the other end, the people who are going to hate on a Blair White because of what's happening in this other thing that she doesn't like either, that's also part of the problem. That's my point.
uh,
Someone said she didn't have bottom. I thought she had bottom.
I don't remember. I don't know, and I
She
don't
tucks
care.
very well.
Um, where was I? The
Okay,
point.
let's go ahead and go straight back to the point then.
The point I was trying to make is that so the NFL, much like the McDonald's example, in attempting to pander to an audience that one, you could argue it didn't need, and two, you could argue they weren't going to get very much of anyway, they have watered down their product.
Hmm.
So this is something Whitlock has been harping on for a couple of weeks now, is that it's very odd that the NFL has spent years, decades even, watering down its product in the name of making it more exciting. So they've continually hamstrung the defense to make things more exciting. And yet, scoring is down this year. I want to say it's like the lowest average. So you have outliers like the Miami game. Holy cow. Okay, so it looks like, oh my gosh, scoring's way up.
Can I tangent for just a second on that?
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel's, no, what's the coach?
something McDaniels. I don't know. I can't keep track of the Josh McDaniels is the New England guy. I think
No,
it's Mike McDaniel.
Josh McDaniels was the New England guy who was then the Las Vegas head coach, and
Yeah,
he just resigned.
yeah,
So it's Mike McDaniels.
I think so.
The Miami head coach. We will identify him, her, they as that. Uh,
Z
Miami
Zer.
head coach Mike McDaniel. Okay, I was right. You freaking pussy. I'm sorry to use that word. He didn't kick the field goal that would have gotten the record points because he didn't want the other team to feel bad. He wanted the optics. And I'm telling you, as a man, the optics are everybody on your team could have been written in history.
Mm-hmm.
You made a decision for your own optics when everybody on your team, every fan watching during that year would have had something for the rest of their lives. And you let it drop because nobody's going to remember the 70-point game now because it wasn't the record.
Mm-hmm.
2 years from now, they're going to be like, someone's going to say, who scored 70 points on Denver in 2023? Somebody out there might say, well, Miami had the best offense that year, so probably them. That's it. And you didn't do that. That kicker could have been in the record books for scoring the 73rd point. You could have been in the record books as a head coach, but you wanted the optics.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted everybody, you wanted that feel good moment that
Well,
you're not
that's
running
actually
up the,
that much of a tangent because a lot of what the NFL has been doing as a whole has been about optics.
well,
That looks bad.
who everybody who one of the most famous coaches in NCAA history is who? Bobby Knight, right? What did he say when he was accused of running up the score?
Oh, something to the effect of it's the other team's job to stop me or something like that.
Exactly.
Isn't that what he said?
He said, I
Yeah.
put the backups in. It's the other team's job to stop them. What am I going to tell these guys? Don't score?
Yeah, don't play hard, guys. The
Yeah.
exact opposite of what you tell them all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what he should have said. He should have said, "Go kick the field goal. It's their job to stop you."
So
I mean, the
by
backup running back had 4 touchdowns that day.
yeah.
It's not
So
like he was putting the starting lineup out there to run up the score.
I think Tyreek Hill only had one touchdown. I mean, they were
No, he
spreading
had
the ball
3.
around. Oh, he had three? I
He
thought it was
had
Waddle that
3.
ended up with
Mostert
a
had
bunch.
4, and A Chain had 3.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Um anyway, the point being that's an outlier, so it looks big. So, and that's what the NFL
Giddy.
wanted. They wanted the optics. They wanted scoring to go up. They wanted, you know, yards. They wanted the ball moving because they thought that's what makes it exciting. Forgetting the fact that for a long time, one of the most famous players playing was Troy Polamalu, and it was because he would lay big hits on people, and that was exciting. Well, in the name of optics, in the name of hits that make you cringe and go, "Ooh, that looked bad," they have actually made their product weaker, along with making it more dangerous, I would contend. Because so Whitlock's theory is that, and he's had guys on like Warren Sapp, who played at the NFL level. Whitlock just played at Bowling Green. If he just played at the college level, and he still goes to camps, to practices, to games. He's still, you know, he's still in with a lot of current players and teams and things. And he's been making the point that they
I,
don't practice anymore.
just out of curiosity, I didn't know he played at Bowling Green. What years did he play there?
Whitlock,
Yeah,
uh, I want to say it was late '80s, early '90s.
because my former mentor, Scott Keller, was the head strength coach at Bowling Green for a
No,
while.
it was a while ago. And
Yeah,
Whitlock's,
he's not young. So
yeah, he's like pushing 60, I think, Whitlock. Um, anyway, so it was a while ago. Uh, but Sapp was basically detailing what we all kind of already knew from the last collective bargaining agreement, where the players said we want less physicality in practice, and the NFL went along with it. The same reason they cut down on the preseason games, theoretically, because this reduces the chance of injury, and we want our stars on the field because that's more exciting. But what you've done is, and I think this is looking at it after the fact, because we've already seen it going into effect the last couple of years. I've been griping about defense and the lack of quality hitting and good tackling for a while now. And now I think you're starting to see it on the offensive side as well, because, as Whitlock says, his theory is defense is reactive. Yes, you're going to call some plays, you're going to have blitzes and things, but basically defensive is reactive. So you don't need the team practice quite as much as the offense does. Offense is a coordinated effort that is supposedly driving the action. They need the practice more, and they're not getting it because they don't do real practice. Like anyone even remotely our age who just played high school football would know, you get out there and you actually play. You hit each other. And you have to, because that's how you get used. That's how your body gets acclimated. It's also how your mind gets acclimated. And now, because they're not practicing, they're just basically doing walkthroughs. The offense is now also starting to suffer. The same thing that grumpy old men like me have been saying about the defense for years now is, okay, because you were pandering, because you didn't like the optics, you've been taking all of these steps to please people who don't like you anyway. And now you've basically put out new Coke or a McDonald's salad, or, pick your previous example of pandering equals watered down product equals, you know, uh, I don't think it was just the kneeling and just the election that's had the NFL see its first actual ratings decline.
Well,
I
there's a third element to this, but let me stick with this one for a while. This gets to what we've talked about with politics as well. Is progress doesn't mean improvement,
mm,
and the history of the NFL is making it more exciting. The forward pass, the wedge, all of these things were all things that were added to make it more exciting. I mean, people forget that there was no forward pass for a while,
mhm.
but now there is, and but there's a certain point where there aren't as many improvements to be had. And just because things aren't moving forward doesn't mean it's good or doesn't mean it's bad. Moving forward for forward's sake isn't always good. And so they're trying to do all these things to make it more exciting, but they're really grasping at straws because it's pretty much hit peak excitement. And that's
Well,
not
and
good for people who have an admin job that are there just for ideas and they need to justify their job.
mhm. And I'm curious what the numbers are going to be going forward, because um I think the Bud Light, the Anheuser-Busch boycott was very instructive on how pushing back against woke nonsense, where it can be uh effective. And the reason that football has been able to live in an artificial environment for so long is because they're the only product. It's easy to boycott Anheuser-Busch, not just because their beer sucks, but because you have options, lots
Mm-hmm.
of options.
Well, and especially with all of these smaller breweries opening up.
Hmm.
And then you start saying, well, you know what? I should support that local brewery anyways.
Hmm.
And you make that decision. Now, here's the third thing that's going into this year, especially. So again, back to politics. For the longest time, politicians have always been corrupt. Everything's always been corrupt. Uh, it just wasn't as obvious because they still relied on your vote and they still didn't have a monopoly on everything. But now we know the elites are doing things for the elite's sake, but they still keep winning. NFL is that way now this year too. Look at go just do a little Google search or TikTok search or Instagram search or whatever on weird things happening related to betting odds in the NFL this year. The officiating has been the worst it's ever been, and it always goes in Vegas's favor every single time. And I think we've hit a peak point where they know they're not going to lose any money by just being obvious about it. Whereas in the past, it was a little call here, someone would complain about a little thing there. But uh, key example: the Cleveland Browns beat the San Francisco 49ers this year. It was their first loss. And the Cleveland Browns made their last touchdown drive. 90% of it was penalty yards. And it wasn't one big bad play. It was call after call after call after call. That was like, even the announcers were like, yeah, we have to support this because the script says so. But that was a little bit shaky. That was the most bet on game in the last decade in Vegas. Vegas made a lot of money with San Francisco losing that day. A lot of money. Like
Um,
Ukraine style money. That's how much they made.
where is it? You, so have you seen this clip of Mitch McConnell saying the quiet part out loud?
I might not have.
So I'm trying to find a clip. Um, I'll see if I can find it later. But this is instructive for because of what you said about the elites not caring, the elitists not caring, and the woke radical left has been the most obvious because they've been the most out there for a few years now. You know, you look at the Squad and the blatant anti-Semitism amongst them, and it's but it's not just on the left, and the right is starting to realize, oh, we don't have to fake it anymore either because there's not going to be any real consequences. And so it was in an interview last week sometime, I think, that McConnell's paraphrasing said, I don't understand why anyone would be against the aid to Ukraine because where that money actually goes is to American arms manufacturers. Now, since the Vietnam War, the left has been accusing the right of being warmongers for profit. And the right has always said, no, this is about national security, national interest, freedom and liberty. This is about principle. And yes, it just so happens that somebody's going to make some money because somebody has to make these arm systems. Mitch McConnell is saying the quiet part out loud and saying, yeah, we're in a proxy war against Russia because it helps our economy and hurts one of our greatest adversaries. So I don't see the problem here.
The problem is, how many of us normal American citizens benefit from that helping of our economy?
Yeah, yeah. Let's set aside the, you know, perhaps thousands. We don't know because there's no reliable reporting coming out of Ukraine and hasn't been since the invasion, which freaking that's 2 years old now, isn't it? Didn't that start in 2021?
It's
Um,
not quite 2 years, but it's getting there. Yeah.
it's getting there. Uh, so let's set aside the thousands of Russians and Ukrainians who have been killed, maimed, and injured during this conflict. Uh, who Qui Bono, who actually benefits? Mitch, guy who's never had a real job in his life but is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Who actually benefits? Because you're saying the economy, you're saying our manufacturing base, but how far does that actually spread? And especially when you're doing it with money that's fake, because we don't have any money. We are a broke government. It's just people haven't realized it yet. When you look at our debts and our unfunded liabilities, it's all phony money because we can't afford any of it. And I've gone and gotten sidetracked again. I don't remember what my point was anymore. But I think the bigger point is, yeah, the elitists are saying the quiet parts out loud now on both sides because they realized, oh, we've rigged the system so hard, there will be absolutely no consequences for
Yeah.
any of this.
And if for those of us that are old enough to remember, I'm not even old enough, but I still remember. Why did boxing die as a sport? Because the money people got involved, and almost every major fight ended up being fixed at some point or another. And I don't blame the boxers too much because they kind of had a gun to their head, literally. Uh, and once people caught on, they lost interest in boxing because, I mean, even to this day, was it rigged? Was it not? Did that person take a fall? Did were they really staggering there, or was that a fake? Are they taking acting classes? People are like micromanaging or micro analyzing these fights because we just want to know it's real. And football for so long, there was any this is my golden rule. If Vegas is involved, there's never not any outside influence. But it was a nudge here, a nudge there, one bad call, something that might affect the game. And someone might hate on me for saying this, but the best team in the league and the worst team in the league, the difference is like 5%. And a couple little nudges here can influence the outcome of almost any game. But this year, and maybe last year, it just maybe that's what piqued everybody to look a little closer. But then this year is completely obvious. There's a little bit more than nudging going on. It's not just Michael Jordan getting 3 steps every once in a while. It's outcomes of games on ridiculous calls. The refs are determining almost every important game this year. Luckily, I'm a Texans fan, so no game we play is important. But the
I think, for me, it's going to be real interesting come this next game, Dallas versus Philly. That's going to be a big game. And what kind of
yeah, but in your
questionable
in your
calls are we going to
favor,
see?
in your favor, Dallas needs to get to the playoffs and then lose in the first round like every year because that's money. Dallas
Mhm,
is money for the NFL.
mhm.
An underdog team coming from nowhere is money for the NFL. And I think this year it's the Browns. Uh, if not just for the fact that they wanted San Francisco to lose that one game, but it's an underdog team coming out of nowhere, preferably with a tragedy that just happened in that town, like New Orleans Saints after Katrina winning the Super Bowl all of a sudden. The Patriots winning right after 9/11. Huh,
Mhm.
nobody predicted that.
Actually, nobody did because
Exactly.
the greatest show on turf was so much better. They thought there's absolutely no way that the talking heads. I remember because I was a big fan of Warner and the greatest show on turf, and I was shocked at that game. I was like, how did this happen? To the Patriots credit though, they proved they weren't a fluke. They proved they weren't just benefiting from whatever might or might not have been going on,
Mhm.
because they did end up with a 20-year dynasty basically. But uh it was
Well, it's
it was
amazing when the
convenient to the
quarterback
narrative.
decides not to take up all the salary cap. What happens?
Hmm.
And Tom Brady, I like to hate on him in a lot of ways. I have to acknowledge he's the GOAT because I told somebody out loud that if he wins it with another team, I'll acknowledge him as the GOAT, and then he did. Uh, so I have to say it. It's contractual at this point. But no, he is, because just like Tim Duncan with the Spurs, he would negotiate his contract to get a team built around himself.
Hmm.
So that was two-part. It was, I will deal down so you can have more money to buy players, but you're also not going to pay someone else way too much. That was part of the deal as well. And so there was nobody hogging the salary on any of those teams. And they had amazing teams that you could hardly name a player on because they were all B plus players. But when you have 24 or 53 B plus players on the field, you're going to beat a team with one A plus and a bunch of C's every time.
Well, that is, we always try and make a bigger point with the specific examples rather than talking about just the thing. and something you said earlier about there being kind of a sweet spot between I think the late 90s to early 2000s were the sweet spot for the NFL in making the game exciting but letting it still be football.
Mhm.
And and that's because the goal was at the time was still the product. And I don't think the goal is the product anymore for a lot of companies. You know, we've mentioned Anheuser-Busch several times here, and we've talked about it ad nauseum in the past. And I think that's a good example of that is, I mean, you're literally saying you hate your customers. So obviously the product isn't the thing anymore. So, you know, I'm I'm wearing the Ranger shirt today, and I think that's another instructive example is, for all of its faults, baseball has done a decent job in the last couple of decades of creating parity in the league. It's not just the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Cubs, the Yankees who spend twice as much as everybody else. There's actual parity. So you've got a World Series where 2 years ago, both teams lost more than 100 games. It's never happened before. And now they're both in the World Series. And so ideally, that is okay. Let's set the parameters for parity. Let's set the parameters for excitement, but then leave it alone and let the games play out. The NFL has been unable or unwilling or both to leave it alone. And they keep tinkering with it. They've kept tinkering with it every year. And a lot of it is because of outside pressure.
Uh, Let me find something here. But the NFL has a new uh challenge coming up because NCAA rules have changed. Uh, and it's going to make it more difficult for that. Let me see if I can find this. Won't or because the things I'm trying to find a good story on this, but okay, so things have changed in the NCAA where the players can do endorsements and get paid and all of these things now, which I've got a lot of thoughts on, not only from the poor boy that couldn't play sports perspective of you were already getting paid by having a scholarship and
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the student loans that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Also from the work business aspect of yeah, it's called an internship, uh, but also this is not going to help most players. They pitched it as an argument to
Uh-huh.
that these young kids that can barely get a scholarship are going to be able to get paid for playing uh because they can't get a job outside of the school because of their scholarship. That's not what's going to happen. The elites are going to get paid while that kid that nobody knows who he is because he just runs kickoff coverage every Sunday is still going to have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's in commercials because of this? Deion Sanders' son,
Mm-hmm.
because he's Deion Sanders' son, not because he plays football for Colorado. Who's in commercials? That USC kid, right? Who's not in commercials? The guy you don't even know his name because he deep snaps for Utah State, right? That's the guy who's not in commercials because nobody would hire him for a commercial because you don't know who the fuck he is,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Now, every once in a while, you get like that feel good story of the hometown kid who made the team. And uh, uh, so that fan base particularly likes him, but uh, that's that's an outlier, you
No,
know.
this was a rule change to make millionaires multimillionaires.
Yeah.
It was not a rule change to make poor people wealthy or even make a living. There might be something in it that, so correct me if I'm wrong here. There might be something in it with the video games that use their numbers and their stats where they have to pay a little bit. Because I know one of my clients, Jared, got a payout from the MLB video games because he was
Mm,
in them as a person, as a real person.
right.
Uh, so there might be a little bit of that, but even still, I bet you that's scaled based on how likely you are to make the team and what your role is and who's buying the game because, right? Uh, but no, it's back to the NFL. You got that USC quarterback that's saying he wants to pick his team because he's getting paid more in college to play than if he goes into the draft.
And I've heard a lot of people scoffing at that, and I'm going, rookie contracts, man. That's not that far out of the realm of possibility because of the rookie contract scale.
No, he's in what commercial did I just see him in? I just saw him in a commercial and I don't know how many millions he made for that commercial, but it's a national commercial. It's something that plays during the football games. That's I mean, there are people in Hollywood right now working at Home Depot trying to give scripts to somebody and trying to be an extra in a commercial somewhere.
Mhm.
And he gets that because he's the USC quarterback. Getting a free education, getting an interview for his next job, which is typically the number one draft pick. And he has the luxury now of saying, I'm not. So you're talking about parity. I'm not going to go to that bad team because I don't want to. I'm
Mhm.
getting paid more now. We had little tidbits of this before. Remember Eli Manning, Philip Rivers thing,
Yep.
where Eli said, I won't play for the Chargers. I'll hold out if they draft me. And then they drafted him. But then they made the big trade with San Diego to or excuse me, with New York for Eli Manning to get back to the next pick and then pick Philip Rivers. But then they got a whole bunch for him. Things like little maneuvers like that make a difference, right?
Yeah,
Because a T
I'd forgotten Elway did the same thing, and I don't remember who it was that was going to draft him. Um, but he had leverage because he was also a star baseball player.
mm-hmm,
He had the option of football or baseball, and he wanted to go NFL, but he didn't want to play for. I don't remember who it was. It may have been the Raiders, and he said they're dysfunctional, and I don't want to play for that organization. But he had leverage. Most people don't have leverage. Bo Jackson did that. He got ticked off at Tampa Bay and said, "Screw you guys, I'm going to MLB because you screwed me."
mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a difference between having leverage because you're a multi-sport athlete versus having leverage because now uh, advertisers can use your name. I mean, Johnny Manziel is probably freaking ready to shoot himself at this point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because he made all that money illegally, which he shouldn't have done. I'm not condoning it. But Johnny Manziel in this day with these rules,
yes.
I mean, he would have been he would be he could probably own a team right now.
Well, let me go back to my shirt here in the MLB. They're doing similar things where during the World Series broadcast, you have an advertising partner for gambling. And at every single ad break, I see one for I think it's FanDuel.
Mm-hmm.
So why isn't Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame?
Okay, so this is again one of those they're advertising to the people. It's a difference when it's different when a player or coach is
No, no,
gambling.
no, 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 because the entire reasoning behind the MLB and their them being so radically averse to gambling was because of the Black Sox scandal, because they didn't even want the whiff of a fix, because that's what made
Oh, you're
Black
bringing it back
Sox
to my
is
point. If Vegas is
yes,
involved, then there's always
exactly.
something wrong. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So they didn't even want the whiff that there might be a rigged game, because there was definitely a rigged series with the Reds and the White Sox in 1919 for sure. And so if you were even. I mean, that's why a lot of people say, why isn't Shoeless Joe in the Hall of Fame? Because the ruling by baseball at that time and continued on until 2 minutes ago when they decided, oh, we'll partner with gambling because it's money, that you knew that there was a rigged game going on and you didn't inform anybody because there's no evidence that Weaver, I think, was one of the guys, uh, Shoeless Joe Jackson, a couple of others, that they didn't take any money. Joe says he took money and gave it back. Weaver didn't take any money, but they knew or suspected that there was a rigged series going on and they didn't tell anybody. So Rose, there has never been even an allegation, let alone proof, that he rigged. He just bet on games. And when he bet on the Reds, he bet on them to win. So why isn't he? Because now you're partnering with gambling. And a second ago, you didn't want anyone even remotely involved because you didn't want the slightest whiff that there's something sketchy going on here. And I think this is, again, this isn't a tangent. This is the quiet part out loud. This is Mitch McConnell saying, of course, we're going to up Ukraine aid because that just goes to military arms manufacturing. War is good for the economy. Saying the quiet part out loud. This is MLB saying the quiet part out loud. Okay, we didn't actually care about the integrity of the game because when it comes to now the ability for us to make tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars partnering with these gambling institutions, we're just going to do that. My contention is that's penny wise, pound foolish, because you're going to undermine the integrity of your game. You're going to, by making that a focal point with the NFL making scoring and fantasy and now gambling, making that a focal point for excitement, you've lost the excitement on the field. This Saki's all the way back to where I started. And the reason I was ranting about this is because, I've said it before, but I really noticed it this weekend. I stopped watching football after the third quarter of the Cowboys game because they put in their backup quarterback because they were trouncing LA so much. And I didn't watch any other football. And it used to be that if there was a game on, I was watching it, even if it was in the background, because even if I didn't care about the teams, the game itself, I still liked. I still cared about. It was still exciting. That's gone. And I don't know that it's going to come back anytime soon because I don't see the the current NFL leadership as capable of bringing it back or even wanting to bring it back.
I'm trying to look up something because one of my baseball kids, was telling me about a college betting scam that happened. The head coach or someone affiliated put a couple $100,000 on the other team, and then in an effort to throw the game, put a position player as pitcher.
Well, that actually sometimes have to do that, actually, but okay.
They sometimes have to do that, but at the same time, put a position player as the pitcher, and then they still barely lost. But then there was video evidence of the person placing the bet, and it was is not good. So he almost lost in two ways. He almost lost the bet and lost his job, but he just lost his job. He won the bet.
All right, I found the McConnell clip if you want to watch it because
Yeah,
I couldn't
ahead.
remember. I couldn't remember it was where it was originally from, but I remembered where one of the places I heard it. I've heard a number of people playing this clip. It was from Face the Nation, which is the CBS Sunday morning show, and they played it on the Steve Day show. And I don't know how to turn closed captioning on in Rumble, so hopefully this is hearable.
Let's begin, or continue, I should say, with issue 3.
I hear it just fine.
Mitch McConnell says the quiet part out loud.
Mitch McConnell went on CBS's Face the Nation last weekend to discuss Ukraine and says piles of dead Ukrainians and Russians are good for our manufacturing base.
If you look at the Ukraine assistance, let's talk about where the money is really going. A significant portion of it's being spent in the United States in 38 different states. replacing the weapons that we sent to Ukraine with more modern weapons. So we're rebuilding our industrial base.
That's what President Biden's seeking to do.
It's correct. No Americans are getting killed in Ukraine. We're rebuilding our industrial base. The Ukrainians are destroying the army of one of our biggest rivals. I have a hard time finding anything wrong with that. I think it's wonderful.
I can tell you one big thing wrong with that is a shit ton of people are dying.
That was pretty ghoulish, I think is the appropriate term there. That was pretty bad.
Yeah, he even looked like a ghoul in that.
Yeah. So, yay. This is where we are, world.
And then we have this guy. Not endorsing him, but I am endorsing this statement.
Yeah, you didn't share with sound, but
Oh,
I see the caption there.
let me share with sound because it's got to have his voice. It's got to have his voice.
Hundreds of thousands of people, and Ukraine settled. It'll be settled very quickly. We're not choosing sides. What we want is we want people to stop dying. Hundreds of thousands of people are dying in that war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is his, that was the best statement of that whole town hall.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it is his best push forward.
It was his best push back during that interview.
And he needs to make that the push on the Middle East. In pretty much all issues. It's like, look, this is a complicated issue, but we need people to stop dying. And that's all he has to say. How it gets done, well, that's complicated. Because, but the problem is, the thing is, his opponents can't answer that question either. So if he doesn't have an answer, well, no one has a counter answer either. Other than McConnell, who says, well, people can die because we're going to prosper from it. You know, I'm all about making a buck. But if I hurt somebody in the process, we'll call that an ethics issue.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'd be a CrossFit coach.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we've rambled enough.
Oh, well, you want me to do my little statistics thing real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So speaking of people in power and how they influence you and stuff. So I was studying for my statistics test and, you know, I knew a lot of this stuff, but I hate this class because the questions are like, here's a concept. Tell me everything you know about it. And even if you copy word for word from the textbook, you still get a few points off. And it's like, you forgot to mention this word. And this test was written by women, by the way. Tell me your mind. And by the way, it must be everything I want to hear. That's exactly how this test is.
Yeah.
But
well, if you don't know why, then I'm not telling you. Okay.
So a simple concept that most people will understand is the mean, right? So we're looking for the mean in the equation. If you're looking at a bell curve, it's where everything comes together. You take the total and average it with the number of participants. That's how that's one of the easiest calculations in statistics. So if you have 100 people and you say, how many apples did you eat this last month? And that was a survey. And you got a variety of answers and it totaled out at 700 apples. That's 7 apples per person, right? That would be your mean. So that's pretty simple, right? Let's go ahead and complicate the equation. All right.
Yes, let's.
So calculating the mean. We have class 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of reading. Simple calculation. Ignore all of those symbols because you just added these 3 things up, divided it by 5 to get the answer. Then if we go to the next slide, can we see the slides?
I see it. Can you? Yep, there it moved. Okay.
Okay, so calculating the mean with a frequency table. Now we're complicating things
Mm-hmm.
because look at that equation that just came out of that. When I could have just taken all of the numbers, added them up, and then divided by how many different numbers I had, I would have gotten the exact same answer. Now we have a weighted mean. Did it switch?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have a weighted mean. And the whole point of this was there's homework assignments and there's tests, but we want them to count equally. So what we're going to do is do a different calculation to make them count equally. We're going to do all of this to make them count equally. What is that the same as, if you can look at it really quickly?
Wait, isn't that just the first one?
It's the same as adding all these numbers up and dividing by how many numbers you added. But we put this in the paper because we want to sound smart.
Okay.
Wait, there's more.
Why?
Alternative weighted mean formula. Whoops.
Why?
So now we're going to take that exact same thing, do the exact same thing with this formula, because that's what we want to put in the paper to get the exact same answer. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about how they just want to confuse you so you read their conclusion and take their word for it. Because all of those things resulted in the same thing. The thing you could have done with basic arithmetic.
So when you mentioned you had something on statistic shenanigans, it reminded me of something I mentioned to you, and I couldn't find the clip because I couldn't remember if it was in episode 4 or 5 of Jordan Peterson's Exodus roundtable that he's been doing. And so in one of them, and I don't even remember the context of it, but he makes the point that he knows people and he's had discussions with people who as a clinician, you're not necessarily a numbers person. So he knows people who hire a third party to do their statistical analysis, to do their numbers for them. And they do all that, and then the clinician will write the paper. Okay. And as he puts it, oh, you can't do that, eh? Because paraphrasing as best as I can remember, as he puts it, you're making a value judgment on every one of those numbers because every one of those numbers has a context. And so you have to make a value judgment of, what numbers and where and how much priority. And, it's the classic idea of garbage in, garbage out. You're trying to make sure you're not putting garbage in, except going off of your example here. No, I think they are trying to make sure they put garbage in and just make sure it's confusing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's how can I make this to where they can't follow it?
So
if you're going to a class, to the thing she had there for the weighted means was the homework versus tests. Well, she wanted the homework to count as each homework assignment to count as much as each test assignment. So why don't you just have scores? And you have 9 scores. And so you take the total of the scores divided by the 9 and you get your mean, right? Whereas if I'm looking at it as a person reading, so this was a paper on whatever, and it had to do with tests and homework. If I'm looking at it and I saw weighted mean and I saw that there were less tests than there were homeworks, I would think that as a lay person, I would think she's trying to make it to where the fact that there's a lesser number of tests doesn't matter, but the tests are going to be weighted equally against the homework.
That's what it sounds like. And
sounds like.
If you're someone whose eyes glaze over when you look at mathematical equations like that, you're just going to skim past that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because otherwise it's just scores. If they all count equally, then it's just scores. But if you're going to weight the tests versus the homework, you're thinking that those 3 scores are going to be equally measured against those 5 homework scores. And that's not what they're talking about. But there's a fancy equation to go along with it, so it must be legitimate.
Clearly.
And people don't know what the sigma is, which is sum. Put a Greek letter in there. That makes it helpful.
Oh yeah, that clears everything right up.
What do they say? I hate mathematics. It's all Greek to me. But this is also a reason why. Someone, I was in a group discussion earlier, and they were like, "Oh, I hate stats class. I want to just be in the clinical part of it. I just want to be working with talking to people." And I piped up. I was like, "But you have to understand the stats, because this is how you call out the bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly how you call out the bullshit, because people are going to hide in there."
Yeah. Or to your point, how you create it.
Yeah. No, I'm being taught to create it, but also being taught to create it helps you identify it. And I think this is one of the great things about this little mini quest I've been on, because we've talked about this for the last 2 years. And now I'm in it, and I have direct examples of how it's being done.
So, and where this ties into where we started and where it kind of, sparked my brain is that the people who are making these stupid, seemingly from the outsider looking in, stupid decisions, they have facts and figures to back up their decision, but those facts and figures were created to back up their decision. Their decision wasn't created because they saw the facts and figures. It's, oh yeah, I like that. Give me some numbers to back that up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's completely bass backwards on purpose, because the whole point is to give you what you want, not to actually do what's right. However you might want to define right.
Yeah, that therein is the philosophical question. What's right? I know what's right for me. I maybe even know what's right for a couple people around me in certain situations. That's why people pay me money. But I don't know what's right for everybody. I just know I'm done with people dying for stupid reasons. I mean, people are going to die, but
yeah.
I would like them to die of natural causes, which can be a lot of, I guess technically war is a natural cause, because we seem to want to do it all the time, so it must be human nature. But
it's pretty well ingrained.
That show on Netflix is good, though, partly because Morgan Freeman is narrating it, but yeah, just the fact that everything kills each other, and that's how you live. It's kind of fun.
Nature is metal.
Nature is metal. Yes.
Did you get to the ants attacking the termites?
No, I'm only
Nature
3
is
episodes
metal.
in, because they're actually relatively long, and I did have all those assignments this week.
Yeah, we didn't even get to our creation argument, because we had other arguments to be cathartic. So we'll have to talk about that. For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, Life on Our Planet is a new Netflix produced documentary that they've been pimping for several weeks now. And finally came out, and I started watching it, and I said, and I told you, you should watch this, and maybe you'll get some cathartic release from it as well. But we're gonna have to shout at each other at some point over creationism, just for funsies. But maybe we'll get into that next week.
Sounds good to me. Sounds like as good as anything else. Better than politics.
All right, we'll see y'all next time.
All right, no advice given, no disclaimers needed. I don't think. Did we give any advice?
I don't think so.
We'll see you Friday for Wheel of Time. There were lots of good comments for the last one. So we'll definitely have some stuff to riff on.
Later.